Hi guys, this is part 2 of my Luke Skywalker Lightsaber tutorial. If you haven't seen part 1, you're on the wrong video. Go and watch part 1, come back to this. If you have seen part 1, then let's continue on. So we have our model made now and it looks pretty nice, but it needs some textures. Okay, so to texture this thing, what I'm going to do is select the whole model here. Okay, and I think actually before we do, if we get these buttons and we shift select the lightsaber itself, Control J, we can just make that all one item. I don't think that has to be separate. Okay, so once we've got these, if we go into edit mode and select everything, and I'm just going to use Smart UV Project, okay? Leave it on the standard settings, press OK. If we go to the UV editing tab, we can see that looks pretty good. I think that's probably going to give us a decent unwrap. I can't see there being any problems with seams there. I've got a little add-on here. It's a free add-on that I'll link to below. It's called Text Tools. Let's just add it, check a map quickly. Yeah, you can see that there's going to be a seam down here, but I don't think it's going to be too noticeable, to be honest, with the sort of texture that we've got. We'll have a look. Right, so I'll just undo that, and if we go to the shading panel, create a new material. Okay, we're going to go to the material tab and let's rename this metal. This is going to be our base metal texture, right? So I have a few textures here that I got from textures.com, I believe. I'll leave a link to them below as well, and also you can use any texture you want. If you want to use a different metal texture, then fill your boots, do whatever you want. So I'm going to drag in the albedo and connect it, and then I'm going to drag in the metallic color space. I'm going to set to non-color. I can just hide these to make them smaller. The normal map, drag that in, connect it up, and I'm going to search for a normal map node, connect that up. Once again, color space is going to be non-color. And finally the roughness channel. Let's just drag that across to there. Non-color, non-color. Right, now that looks pretty good. It's like a nice metal effect. It's shiny, but it isn't like ridiculously shiny. Like I said, you can't really see where the seam is there. It's done a good job of hiding that. By the time you render it, you won't notice that at all. You can play around with the UV map if you end up with a seam in a bad place. You can unwrap it yourself. But for the most part, it's not necessary. Alright, so now that's our basic metal texture done. That'll look pretty good once we render it. If you want to change the roughness channel to make it like super chrome and shiny, or to make it look old and beaten up, then you can do that, but I'm just going to leave it as it is. I'm going to create a new material here, and I'm going to call this one plastic, right? And the plastic material goes in between these grooves, and it goes on the buttons, and it goes on this little stem piece here. Okay, it's like a shiny black plastic. So I'm going to change the base color to just solid black. I'm going to go into face select mode, and I'm going to select these two faces, control, press plus a couple of times until we've got the everything selected on those faces. Make sure you're on plastic again and assign, and that'll assign that to them. Then we need the plastic to go down here. So I'm going to press Shift and Alt and select all of these pieces, right? Obviously leave a gap at the end for the metal, because you can see there's a metal rim down each side. And just Alt Shift click until you have all of these selected. And it goes to there. Once you've got that, click plastic again, assign, and that looks pretty cool, right? But we need to make the actual plastic texture. We're going to make it look a little bit better than this. What we're going to do is we're going to add in a noise, forgot how to spell, noise texture. Okay, I'm going to add in a bump node. Right, and at first, what's going to happen is you're going to get some weird texture in here. So I'm going to use the texture coordinate node. Since I have Node Wrangler enabled, if you don't have Node Wrangler on, it's a really cool add-on. It's in the preferences, go and turn that on. But I can just press Control and T with this selected, and it'll give us a texture coordinate in a mapping node. If you haven't got that add-on and you can't find it, just add those yourself. You can find them just by doing a search. Right, I'm going to get the object data and connect that to the vector. And then I'm going to set the strength down to something like I don't know, 0.05 maybe. The scale I'm going to play with until I get something nice, maybe like a 1.5 or a 2. Yeah, 3 doesn't look bad. I just want to have a little bit of variation to the plastic so it doesn't all just look perfectly smooth. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this noise texture. I'm going to duplicate that and connect the vector to the vector. I'm going to use the factor of this and put it into the roughness. And what this is going to let us do, if we add in a color ramp into the middle, then we can change the color of this white one. Drag it in about a third of the way down, change the color of it, and just, I don't know, like a light grey, something like that. And that'll give us a shiny plastic texture that'll have like a little bit of variation to it. So you can see there, as I change this up, you kind of get these like dirty marks appearing, instead of just having like a all one colour. Like if I disconnect this and it's all the same, it looks really fake. So I'm just going to connect this up, maybe give it a bit distortion, and that looks pretty cool, right? That looks like a nice realistic plastic. Right, once we've got this done, the third material that we need to add is going to be this kind of like coppery bronze texture. So what we're going to do for this, if I go back to the metal and I'm just going to select these nodes, in fact I'm just going to select every node, Control C, I'm going to make a new texture, call this copper, select those nodes and delete them, and paste that in, and that'll give us obviously an exact replica of the metal texture, so nothing will change, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to select the faces that need to have that on, which is be this, this, and this. Go to copper, assign, and once again you still won't see any changes, but we're going to add in a mix RGB. Okay. I'm going to stick that into there. I'm going to change the colour to be a sort of coppery colour, and I think for this I'm going to use something like a soft light. Right, and that gives us a really nice like realistic copper effect. I'm going to slide this all the way up to 1. So have a play around with the colour and find an exact shade that you like. I'm pretty happy with this, so I'm going to leave it about there. One last change that we're going to make to this is I'm going to go to the sheen value, and I'm going to give it a 0.4, and I'm going to stick the tint all the way up, and then we're going to have a play with the roughness value, and we're going to use a colour ramp for that. So I'm going to search for a colour ramp, and I'm going to add this in. And I'm just going to make it a little bit more rough than the original texture was, but with a bit more of a highlight shine. So there'll be just a little bit of variation in between the two metal textures. You don't want it to look like literally the same metal, just a different colour. Right, so something like that looks pretty good to me. So that's the main texturing done. We obviously need to do the buttons, the lit up buttons, and we need to do the lightsaber core itself. So for these, let's make a new material, and I'm going to call this one red glass. Okay, and this is going to be super simple. I'm just going to stick the transmission all the way up. I'm going to give it a roughness value of like nothing, and I'm going to give it a colour which is like a darkish red. Okay, and then I've decided that it looks pretty cool if you light these buttons up. So I'm going to use an emission and a mix shader, right? I'm going to stick the mix shader into here. I'm going to connect the emission to the bottom. For the factor, I'm going to use a layer weight node, and I'm going to take the Fresnel. And what this is going to do is it's going to change if you see the lit up part or if you see the glass part, depending on the angle that you look at. I'll show you what I mean by that. So let's set the strength to like 3, and we'll give this a red colour as well. And then if we go into rendered view, you can see like if you come from the side, it starts to look almost like more white. That's because you're seeing the glossiness of the material. But if you look at it straight on, it looks more like the glowing material. So it's like a nice way to get a realistic effect on like lit up glass and things like that. So that's our red glass. We're going to copy this with Control C. We're going to go over to the other one, select those nodes, delete them, paste that in, and we can rename this material to green glass. And then, as you imagine, we just need to change the colours. So set this one to green and this to green as well. And if we have a look at this in rendered mode, then that looks pretty cool. Obviously the rest of the scene looks pretty crap because we haven't had any lights yet. Right, so go back to material preview mode. I'm going to select the lightsaber core, give that a new material, and just name this core. Get the principal shader and delete it, and add an emission, right? Connect up the emission to the surface, make the colour bright green, and then give it a really high strength. Let's try like 25, see what this looks like. Go into rendered mode, maybe try 30, 40. It stops really making a difference past that point. I would say to go 30. 30 is a good value. I think that's what I used before. Right, and I know this looks crap at the moment, but we're going to add all the glow and things in Compositing. All we want now is really the core of the thing, which should look pretty much just white or almost white. Right, so if we go back into material preview mode, that is the actual lightsaber really done. If we go into top view, add a new mesh and create a plane, scale this up to be, I don't know, something like this. And then we need to figure out the camera angles. We can get rid of this reference picture now, so I'm going to select this and delete it. Okay, and actually before, there is one more thing I want to do. I was going to do it afterwards, but it's probably best to do it now. If we select this again, what we need to do is to add this like crisscross pattern to the top of the switch. I'll show you what I mean. It's easier just to show it than to explain it. So if we select everything in edit mode again and select these 4 faces by holding down shift and clicking on them, go into the top view, and project from view bounds. go into UV editing mode, okay, and we're going to add in a new texture here. I have a texture that I've already made, and it's just some stripes, right? I'm going to drag that over into here so we can see everything, and it's just going to add a stripy pattern. So if we select this, scale it with S, Y, and just scale it down to be roughly the same proportions. It doesn't really matter, you could leave it like that to be honest, but just scale that down to be roughly the right proportions. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new material, and I'm going to call this one mix. And into this mix material, what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the standard nodes that are in there. We're going to go up to the metal material, select everything with A, Control and C to copy, go into mix and paste that in. Let's get the material output and drag that down kind of to the bottom. Then let's go to the copper, select everything apart from the output, Control C, go to mix, paste that in, move it down with G, right? So we've got the two different metal textures in here. And we're going to use a mix shader. Okay, and we're going to select that one and this one. I'm going to add an image texture into here. In the image texture, the color is going to connect to the factor. And then I'm going to use that image texture of the lightsaber stripes. That's going to be the factor on this node. Now if we go back into edit mode and assign this mix texture, you can see it's gives us like a crisscross of the two different texture patterns there. And if you want to flip them around the other way, so the chrome's on the copper's on the outside, you just flip these two around, the order of them, and there you go. That looks pretty cool. Right, now back to what we were doing. If we get the ground plane, I'm just going to move this down a little, okay, until you can use Shift for precise control, and I'm going to put this in line with the end of this piece. Right, this is going to be our ground. I'm going to give this a new material as well. Okay, and I've already got some ground materials. I'll link this as well. It's this rock base. Right, and I'm going to connect that up. The normal map, drag that in. Connect this up too. When I first had to go at making this tutorial, what I was going to do is use a displacement map. But to be honest, it wasn't worth the hassle, so I'm not going to do that this time. This texture does come with a displacement map though, so if you want to try adding that yourself, then knock yourself out. But I didn't think it really made that much difference, and it added a lot of extra time to the render because you had to have a really high subdivision level. Even with adapted subdiv, it wasn't very good. Right, so I'm going to get the roughness and I'm going to connect that up, and like all these other channels, apart from the color, I'm going to set it to non-color data, and that's going to be our ground texture, right? But there's a problem. If we go into side view, you can see that it doesn't connect up properly. The way we're going to fix this, well, I'm going to select these buttons here and I'm going to join them with Control and J. I'm going to join these over to the main mesh. And once those are over there, whoa, is that messed up the texturing, or is that just me? Okay, it has. Right, I won't do that. What I'll do is I'll select these two and then select the main lightsaber, and I'll press Control P, parent to object. And then I'm going to select the lightsaber core, hold down Shift, select the lightsaber, Control P, parent to object. And now if we move the main lightsaber everything should be parented to it and it'll be like it's attached. So in the side view, let's go back into wireframe mode. What we need to do is we need to rotate this so that the bottom of this is touching the ground, and so is this. The easiest way to do this is to go into edit mode in wireframe, and if we select this vert here, okay, and then press if I remember the shortcut for this, Shift and S, cursor to selected. That puts our 3D cursor right on that vert. And then if we go back into object mode and select it, set origin to 3D cursor. Now the origin of our lightsaber model is on that pivot point. And what that means is if we go into wireframe mode, we can press R to rotate from the side. I'm going to hold down Shift to have more accurate control, and I'm going to line it up until that's just touching the surface of the rock here, that plane. And then if we go into material preview mode, now it looks like it's lying on this rocky surface, right? So to set up our camera, what we're going to do is I'm going to put it roughly in the place that I want it to be. I'm going to press Control, Alt and numpad 0. I'll do this in layout mode actually. And what that'll do is that'll snap the camera roughly to where our viewpoint was. Then for a bit more accurate control, I'm going to press Shift and Grave Accent. Grave Accent is usually the key that's next to 1. I'll put a picture of the icon of the key up on the screen so you can see what it looks like, but if you press Shift and Grave Accent, then you can use ASDW to move the camera in first person mode. You can also use Q and E to move up and down. And I'm going to find a nice angle on this, something like this could be cool. Let's have a look at this in material preview. Right, when you find an angle that you're happy with, yeah, then I'm going to scale up and move the ground plane just so that it's going completely out the bounds there, because you don't want it cut halfway off. Right, something like this. That looks quite cool. And then let's see what this looks like rendered. Right, so we're getting there, but obviously this is very dark. We need to light this up, so I'm going to go into top view with 7, numpad 7. I'm going to create a new object. I'm going to add a light, and it's going to be a point light. I'll just go back into material preview. I'm going to grab this light, drag it just above the camera, G and Z, and I'm going to put it somewhere over here. If we go back into rendered mode, the power of this light, let's set this to like 1500, and this is going to be what you call a fill light. This is the light that basically just lights everything up a little bit and gives you some basic lighting in there. The max bounces, we don't need this many bounces. Let's set this to like 50. We don't need like 1000 bounces on that. And that's our first main light in there. Maybe put this down to 1000. Right, for our second light, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the first one. In top mode, I'm going to use Shift and D to duplicate, and I'm going to stick it somewhere over here. I'm going to use G and Z to drop it down low. And then if we go back into rendered mode, I'm going to change the color of this light, and I'm going to make it a sort of like a lilac or a blue indigo color, something like that. Blue and orange are complementary colors that are used all the time. If you look at the trailer or a movie poster for nearly everything. You'll see orange and blue, orange and blue. If you watch any Michael Bay movie, everything looks orange and everything looks blue. It's a colour scheme that works really well together, and I use it a lot myself, so I'm going to find a nice sort of bluey purple light for this light over here, and I'm going to set this to see what 1500 looks like. Yeah, that looks quite cool, I like that. And then I'm going to go back to top view, and with that light selected I'm going to duplicate it and move it over here a little bit further away than the blue light. Okay, and let's have a look at this in rendered mode again. Let's try setting the colour to that complementary shade and giving it something like an orangey yellow. So something like this. Maybe turn the brightness down to like, let's try 1000, 600. Yep. I think the light colour could do with being changed to be a bit brighter, a bit less saturated, and that looks quite cool. And the other thing I'm going to do for these two coloured lights is I'm going to change the size of them. The smaller the light is, the more harsh the shadow it casts is going to be, and the more rim lighting it gives off. So let's change this down to like 0.1. Select the blue light, stick this on 0.1 as well. Right, and the other change I'm going to make, that original fill light, I'm going to turn that down. I might give that a 0.1 as well. See how that looks. Right, so yeah, that's looking pretty cool. I'm liking the way this is looking so far. The next thing that we need to do is render this whole thing out, and for that what we're going to do is we're going to use something called a crypto matte. Crypto mattes have just been added to Blender very recently, and it's a super cool tool. So what we're going to do is, if we go into this panel here, the view layer properties, there's a tool here for crypto matte. What we're going to select is material, okay, and that'll add automatically. The only other thing we're going to do is use denoising data. Okay, I'm using the new version of Blender 2.81. That's the version of Blender that you want if you're going to use this type of denoising. If not, feel free to use the original denoising. I'm going to turn that off because I'm going to use the new one because it's better. If you haven't got 2.81, you should download it. It's really cool, by the way. But I'm going to give this a render, and I'll come back once I've done that, because it'll kill my computer if I try and render and record at the same time, and nobody wants to sit through it. Okay, so our lightsaber's rendered out now, and it's looking pretty good. I did make one or two changes before I rendered this out. I used the mapping node and increased the scale of the ground texture because it was a little bit low resolution. I decreased the intensity of that orange light down to like 150 watts because it was a bit too bright, I thought, and I forgot to add that copper texture around the lip pieces, so I just applied the copper texture to those. As you can see, it's a little bit noisy because I used low samples, but I'm going to use the denoising tool anyway to get rid of that, so that shouldn't be a problem. And what we can do here in the rendering tab, the render properties, you can change the look. So depending on how yours comes out, you might want to change this to like a low contrast or like a high contrast or something like that. I'm just going to leave mine on medium because that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go into the compositing tab now. I'm going to select use nodes, okay, and I'm going to add a viewer node so we can see what we're doing here. I'm going to get the image and connect that up to the viewer, and that should put our render into the background. Okay, then I'm going to do a search with Shift A, search for denoise, and because we enabled the denoising data earlier on, which was over here, denoising data under passes, what we can do is we can get noisy image, connect that up to the image node. We can get denoise normal and connect that up, and albedo and connect that up as well. If we press Control Shift and click to have a look at that, it'll take a few seconds just to composite this together. I'll just take a second to do that, and there we go. Now all that noise is gone and it looks pretty good. Right, so now we're going to use that crypto mat that I was talking about earlier. So if we do a search for the crypto mat node, that should bring this thing in. And the way that this works is if we get crypto mat 0 and connect that in, and connect the image from the denoise to the image, crypto mat 2 goes into here, crypto mat material 4 goes into there. If we Control Shift and have a look at these, on pick it gives us different colors for different materials, right? I'm going to pick where it says add, I'm going to select this and I'm going to pick the color of the blade, which is that one. Now if we have a look at the mat, I think the problem here is because I'm using, it's slow because it's running it through the denoiser, so I'm just going to use the main image and connect that over, and it gives us this nice mat, right? So it removes the core from the rest of the scene. I'm going to add into here a mix node, right? And we're going to run this through a blur node. Okay, so let's get the mat, connect that up to image, Control Shift click on this so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to select both of these at once and put that on 150. I like to change the type for this effect to cubic, and that's going to give us the nice blur effect that goes around the end. You can hold Control down and middle mouse button and you can drag the image around. I better see what you're doing. Okay, so we're going to use this blur as the factor of the mix node, right? And we're going to get the denoised image and stick it in the top. Control Shift and have a look at what the mix node's doing here. And the bottom one, we're going to change it to like a bright green. Then, if we set the mode to add, just wait a second while it figures out all this. I'm doing everything through CPU at the moment and I'm screen recording, so it's going to be a little bit slow. But it should give us, there we have it. This, basically what it's doing is it's taking the mat of the core and it's blurring it, and then it's adding, anywhere that's blurred, it's adding that over the top of the image. But because it's said to add, all the white values will just show through and you'll get something really, really cool like this. The one last thing that I would do to this to add a really nice touch of realism to it is if we use the lens distortion, then we can connect that into the image. We can add something called chromatic aberrations. What those are, you'll notice sometimes on a camera you'll get the little bit of distortions in the colour. What we can do is just put this onto like, say 0.1 or something. See how this looks. Once again, it'll take a while because it is having to work out a lot of stuff here. Okay, that's way too much, but you can see that it's like splitting the colours up around the corner. So I'm going to try and 0.01. And you can barely see the effect, so I'm just going to up that slightly to 0.2. And yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. I'm just going to select fit, which will stretch the image right back, because when you're distorting the image it's going to go out of bounds slightly, so this will stretch it back to be exactly the right shape. Okay, and if we go over to the UV editing tab and have a look at our viewer node, then there's our final render, guys. Now you can put that into Photoshop and do any extra tweaks and stuff you want to it, But there's your basic image. I think that looks really cool. It's a nice simple tutorial for you to follow along with. If you try this out guys and you make your own version of this, I would love to see it. Please either post a link to it in the comments, or you can find us on Facebook and post it there. Some people have been sending me their work of tutorials they've done recently, and it's really cool to see. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel. I put new videos up every week. I hope you enjoy this one guys. Catch you next time.